Talia Freeman didn't ask to be noticed, especially not at a school where kids like her always stood out for the wrong reasons. She tried to keep her head down, follow the rules, and stay out of trouble. But trouble had a way of finding her. First, it was extra laps. Then, it was the cruel comments about her hair. And when her PE teacher did something no one could ignore, the whole class watched in silence. What they didn't know, what even Talia didn't fully understand, was who her father used to be, and what he was willing to do for her now. Before we get started, I'm curious, do you usually listen to these stories while relaxing or doing chores? Let me know below. This one's got some tension and a twist you won't expect. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. The final bell rang across Madison Heights High School as Talia Freeman jogged toward the gym. 2 weeks at this new school had taught her one thing: being late to Coach Miller's PE class meant trouble. The kind of trouble that seemed to find her more than the white kids. Talia slipped into the girls' locker room, quickly changing into her gym clothes. She caught her reflection in the mirror, her dark skin and curly hair standing out in a sea of mostly white faces. She took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders the way her father had taught her. Head up, eyes forward, she whispered to herself. The gym smelled of floor polish and sweat as students gathered around Coach Brendan Miller. He was a square-jawed man with a permanent scowl etched into his face. His whistle hung around his neck like a weapon. Freeman, Coach Miller barked when Talia emerged. That's a tardy. 5 extra laps today. Talia checked the clock. But I'm not late, Coach Miller. The bell just. Did I ask for excuses? His eyes narrowed. Now it's 10 laps. Across the circle, Amber Wilson giggled with her friends. They'd arrived after Talia, but Coach hadn't said a word to them. This was the pattern. Different rules for different students. After class, Talia's muscles burned from the extra laps. She was a good runner, track was her thing, but Coach Miller's punishments were about humiliation, not fitness. Nice job out there, Freeman, Coach Miller said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Maybe tomorrow you'll learn to be on time. The drive home was quiet. Talia watched the neighborhoods change from the manicured lawns near school to their more modest subdivision. Her dad had moved them here for a fresh start after retiring from what he only called government work. Marcus Freeman stood in the kitchen when she arrived home, methodically chopping vegetables for dinner. His movements were precise, economical. Everything about him was. At 45, he kept his head shaved, his body military fit. The scar running along his forearm was just one of many stories he never told. How was school? He asked, dark eyes studying her face. Talia shrugged. Fine. That's not your fine face. He set down his knife. What happened? Just Coach Miller being Coach Miller. Talia had dropped her backpack. It's nothing I can't handle. Her father nodded slowly. It was their unspoken agreement. He wouldn't fight her battles, and she wouldn't worry him with every little problem. Sometimes Talia wondered what would happen if her dad knew how Coach Miller treated her. The thought was both scary and satisfying. That night, Talia heard her father on the phone, his voice low and controlled the way it got when he was angry. No, sir. That won't be necessary yet, he said. I promised her I'd let her handle what she can. I respect that. Who was he talking to? What did yet mean? Talia had always known her father was more than he appeared. The mysterious phone calls. The men who sometimes visited, standing straight-backed and serious. The nightmares that woke him shouting in languages she didn't recognize. The next day at school, Talia wore her hair in its natural curls instead of straightening it. Her mother, before she passed, had always told her to be proud of her heritage. In the gym, Coach Miller's eyes locked onto her immediately. Freeman, hair needs to be secured during physical activity. That's a dress code violation. Talia touched her hair, confused. But it is secured. I have a headband. Don't argue with me. His voice carried across the gym. Either fix it or sit out with an F for the day. Across the gym, 3 white girls with loose ponytails continued their warm-ups undisturbed. After school, Talia stood at her locker, fighting tears of frustration. He's always been like that, said a voice beside her. A black boy named Jason leaned against the neighboring locker. Coach has it out for certain students. Always has. Why doesn't anyone say anything? Talia asked. Jason laughed without humor. People have. Their complaints disappear into Principal Wagner's office, never to be seen again. That night, Talia almost told her father everything. The words were there, waiting. But the memory of her father's face when he'd enrolled her, hopeful, proud, stopped her. He'd sacrificed so much to give her this life, this chance. I can handle this, she whispered to herself in the bathroom mirror, practice for tomorrow. Head up, eyes forward. What Talia didn't know was that Marcus Freeman sat in his study, staring at his phone. 20 years of military intelligence had taught him to read between lines. Something was wrong with his daughter. He opened a drawer and removed a small black notebook. Inside were names and numbers, people who owed him their lives. People who never said no when he called. His finger hovered over the first name. Not yet, he whispered. She deserves the chance to fight her own battles. But Marcus Freeman began to prepare for war anyway. It was what he did best. The track field baked under the hot sun as Coach Miller barked orders through his megaphone. Talia pushed herself harder with each lap, sweat streaming down her face. For once, she thought she might get through class without being singled out. Faster, Freeman, Coach Miller yelled. You're slacking. Talia gritted her teeth and sprinted the final lap. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she finished strong, ahead of the others. Coach Miller looked almost disappointed. In the crowded locker room after class, Talia changed quickly. The whispers around her weren't quite quiet enough. Did you see how he's always on her case? Yeah, but he's like that with all the show. She'll hear you. Talia slammed her locker shut. It was just another day. Just another battle. She'd promised herself she could handle it. The next morning, Talia's body ached from yesterday's workout. She stretched carefully, preparing for another day of Coach Miller's special attention. PE was the last class before lunch. The students gathered in front of the equipment room, waiting to be dismissed. Talia stood near the back, her body still warm from exertion. Coach Miller paced in front of them, his face twisted in disgust. Someone in here needs to learn about personal hygiene, he announced loudly. His eyes locked onto Talia. Some people sweat more than others and need to take extra precautions. The classroom fell silent. Coach Miller reached behind him and grabbed a bottle of cleaning spray from his desk. Freeman, he called out. Step forward. Talia froze. Every instinct told her to run, but where would she go? She stepped forward, feeling the eyes of every student on her. Sir. Her voice came out small. Coach Miller's smile sent ice through her veins. He raised the cleaning spray bottle and pointed it directly at her. I will fix that little odor issue, he said, and before Talia could react, he sprayed the solution directly at her face and chest. The chemicals hit her skin with a cold shock. The smell of harsh bleach filled her nostrils. Some of the mist got in her eyes, burning instantly. She raised her hand to shield herself, but it was too late. Time seemed to stop. Some students gasped. Others laughed nervously. A few simply looked away, pretending not to see. Through stinging eyes, Talia saw Coach Miller's smug grin. That's better, he said. Class dismissed. Talia stood frozen in humiliation as students filed past her. The cleaning solution soaked through her shirt, burning against her skin. Her eyes watered from chemicals or tears, she couldn't tell anymore. She rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and trying to rinse the solution from her shirt. In the mirror, her reflection showed red, irritated skin where the spray had hit her neck. Are you okay? A white girl named Zoe stood in the bathroom doorway, her face filled with concern. That was so messed up. I recorded it on my phone. You did? Talia asked, her voice cracking. Yeah, that's assault. You could report him. Talia laughed bitterly. To who? Principal Wagner? Jason says complaints about Coach Miller disappear. Then show your parents, Zoe suggested, holding out her phone. Here, I'll send you the video. The thought of showing her father made Talia's stomach tighten. What would he do? The quiet, controlled anger she sometimes glimpsed in him might explode if he saw someone treating her this way. Ms. Diaz, the English teacher, pushed open the bathroom door. Talia? Someone said you might need help. Her eyes widened at Talia's reddened skin. What happened? The story spilled out like water through broken dam. Ms. Diaz's face darkened with each word. This is completely unacceptable, she said firmly. Come with me. We're going to the principal right now. Principal Wagner's office felt cold and unwelcoming. The man himself sat behind his imposing desk, fingers steepled as he listened to Ms. Diaz recount what happened. That sounds like Coach Miller's inappropriate sense of humor, he said when she finished. I'm sure he didn't mean any harm. He sprayed chemicals on a student, Ms. Diaz insisted. Look at her skin. Principal Wagner barely glanced at Talia's irritated neck. I'll have a talk with him, he said dismissively. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. The matter, as far as he was concerned, was closed. That afternoon, Talia sat in her father's car, unable to look at him. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders. What's wrong? Marcus asked, his voice gentle but probing. Talia stared at her hands. Nothing. That's not nothing, he said, reaching over to tilt her chin up. His eyes widened at the sight of her reddened skin. What happened to your neck? The dam broke. Through tears, Talia told him everything. The targeting, the extra laps, the comments about her hair and body, and finally, the spray bottle incident. Marcus Freeman sat perfectly still as he listened. Only someone who knew him well would recognize the danger in his stillness. When Talia finished, he reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Show me the video, he said quietly. Zoe had sent it to her phone. The 10-second clip captured everything. Coach Miller's words, the spray, Talia's shock, and the students' reactions. Marcus watched it 3 times without speaking. When he finally looked up, his eyes had changed. The warm brown had hardened into something cold and calculating. It was a look Talia had never seen before. Dad, she whispered. He took a deep breath, visibly pulling himself back from wherever his mind had gone. It's going to be okay, he said, starting the car. I promise you that. At home, Talia heard her father making a phone call from his study. It's Freeman, he said, his voice different somehow. Harder. Military. I need a favor. Something in his tone sent a chill down Talia's spine. For the first time, she wondered exactly what her father did before he retired, and what he was capable of doing now. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Talia picked at her breakfast. Her father moved about the kitchen with unusual energy, his phone buzzing frequently. Are you going to the school today? She asked, trying to sound casual. Marcus set down his coffee. Not yet. You said you wanted to handle this yourself first. I tried, Talia admitted. Ms. Diaz took me to Principal Wagner, but he just said he'd talk to Coach Miller. Marcus nodded slowly. Then it's time for your next move, which is document everything, he said, sliding a small notebook across the table. Times, dates, witnesses, exactly what was said. Build your case. It was strange advice from a man she'd expected to storm the school in righteous anger. But something in his eyes told her this was just the beginning of a larger strategy. What are you going to do? She asked. Prepare, he said simply. Just in case. At school, Coach Miller acted as if nothing had happened. If anything, his treatment of Talia grew worse. During laps, he singled her out, making her run extra distances until her legs felt like rubber. Getting tired, Freeman, he taunted. Thought you were supposed to be good at this. Talia wrote everything in the notebook. Times, words, witnesses. Each entry fueled a growing fire in her chest. After class, Ms. Diaz caught her in the hallway. How are you holding up? I'm documenting everything like my dad suggested, Talia said, showing her the notebook. Ms. Diaz smiled sadly. Smart man, your father. I've been doing the same thing. She lowered her voice. I've reported Coach Miller 3 times in the 2 years I've been here. Somehow the paperwork always disappears. So nothing will happen. Talia asked, deflated. I didn't say that. Ms. Diaz's eyes hardened. It just means we need to be smarter about how we fight. That afternoon, the video of Coach Miller spraying Talia began circulating among students. In the cafeteria, She could feel the stares, hear the whispers. Some students avoided her gaze. Others offered quiet support. Everyone's seen it, Zoe said, sitting beside her at lunch. They can't ignore this now. But the administration did exactly that. After school, Principal Wagner's secretary called Talia to his office. Inside, the principal sat with a stern expression, hands folded on his desk. "Miss Freeman," he began without preamble, "I understand there's a video circulating that portrays a member of our faculty in a negative light." Talia sat straighter. "The video shows exactly what happened. Videos can be misleading," he replied dismissively. "What concerns me is that sharing such content violates our school technology policy." Shock rendered Talia momentarily speechless. "I'm being called in because of the video? Not because a teacher sprayed chemicals on me." Principal Wagner's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Coach Miller has been spoken to about his inappropriate attempt at humor. But distributing videos taken on school property without consent is a serious violation." "This is wrong," Talia said, her voice shaking. "What would be wrong," Principal Wagner continued, "is allowing this incident to damage a respected teacher's reputation. Coach Miller has been at this school for 15 years. His record speaks for itself. So does that video," Talia countered. The principal's friendly facade dropped. "Miss Freeman, you're new here. I suggest you consider how pursuing this matter might affect your time at Madison Heights. It would be a shame if this incident jeopardized your academic future." The threat hung in the air between them. When Talia got home, her father was in the backyard. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. 3 men she'd never seen before stood with him, all with the same military bearing, the same watchful eyes. They fell silent when she approached. "Talia," her father said, "these are some old colleagues. We're just catching up." The men nodded politely, but their eyes assessed her with an intensity that suggested this was no casual reunion. That night, Talia showed her father the new entries in her notebook, including Principal Wagner's thinly veiled threat. Marcus listened without interruption, but his jaw tightened with each word. When she finished, he made another call. "The situation has escalated," he said to the person on the other end. "We moved to phase 2. The next morning, a large manila envelope waited on the kitchen table. "What's this?" Talia asked. "Information," Marcus replied, "about Coach Miller. My colleagues did some research. Inside were printed pages detailing Coach Miller's employment history. 3 previous schools. Complaints at each one. Always buried. Always followed by quiet transfers to new districts. He's done this before," Talia whispered, anger rising in her throat. "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "And Principal Wagner has helped cover it up here. 2 formal complaints were filed last year. Both disappeared from school records." "How did you get this information?" Talia asked, looking up at her father with new eyes. Marcus hesitated. "I've spent my life gathering intelligence in places where people think their secrets are safe. This," he gestured to the papers, "was easy. What do we do now?" "We could go to the school board," Marcus said. "But Wagner has influence there too. So we've hit a dead end?" Talia asked, deflated. "No," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "We've just identified the battlefield. Now we prepare for the next phase." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Talia, I need to tell you something about my work before I retired." "Your government job," she said. "I was a commander," he said quietly. "Special operations. Black Ops missions that never officially happened in places we were never officially present." Talia stared at her father, this man she thought she knew, as he continued. "The men you saw yesterday, we serve together. When one of us needs help, the others come. No questions asked." "Are you saying you're going to use military tactics against my PE teacher?" Talia asked, equal parts horrified and fascinated. "I'm saying we have resources," Marcus clarified. "And it's time to use them." That afternoon, Coach Miller cornered Talia after class. "I don't appreciate being made into some kind of villain," he hissed. "You should know your place here." His fingers wrapped around her arm, squeezing until it hurt. Talia winced, trying to pull away. "Let go of me," she said firmly. "Or what?" he challenged, tightening his grip. Let go. Each word was cold and clear. Coach Miller released her with a shove. You're making a big mistake, Freeman. That night, Talia showed her father the purple bruise forming on her arm. Marcus Freeman looked at the mark on his daughter's skin, and something shifted in his eyes. The careful restraint he'd maintained cracked, revealing the warrior beneath. Enough, he said quietly. We're done playing by their rules. Dawn broke over the Freeman house as 4 men gathered around the kitchen table. Marcus stood at the head, spreading out documents with military precision. Talia watched from the doorway, still in her pajamas, as the men she now knew were her father's former team members examined the evidence they'd gathered. This is James, Marcus said, gesturing to a tall man with watchful eyes. Former intelligence analyst. The best there is at finding what people try to hide. James nodded at Talia. Your father saved my life in Kandahar. Michael, Marcus continued, pointing to a compact, muscular man. Communications and tech. Nice to finally meet you, Michael said. Your dad talks about you constantly. And Ray, Marcus finished, indicating the oldest of the group, his dark skin marked with a scar above his right eye. He was my second in command. Ray smiled warmly. You look just like your mother. The men turned their attention to the documents, complaint records, personnel files, witness statements, all obtained through channels Talia couldn't begin to imagine. Principal Wagner has buried 3 formal complaints against Miller in the past year alone, James reported. Before that, Miller left 2 different school districts following similar incidents. Always with students of color, Michael added grimly. Ray tapped a document. Wagner's protecting him. The question is why. They're golf buddies, Marcus explained. But it's more than that. Wagner's afraid of lawsuits. A pattern of ignoring racial discrimination could cost the district millions. So he buries the evidence, Talia said, understanding dawning. All 4 men turned to look at her. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. And threatens students who speak up. So what's the plan? Talia asked. Go to the school board. The men exchanged looks. The board won't help, Ray said gently. Not when Wagner controls what information they see. Then what? Talia pressed. We create a situation where they can't ignore the evidence, Marcus explained. We need everything documented, witnessed, and public. The fundraiser, Michael suggested. Annual school fundraiser is next Friday. Parents, board members, local officials, everyone will be there. Perfect, Marcus agreed. That gives us 1 week to prepare. The men dispersed, each with specific tasks. James would continue gathering evidence. Michael would handle surveillance. Ray would coordinate with sympathetic teachers like Ms. Diaz. That day at school, Talia noticed subtle changes. Ms. Diaz smiled at her with newfound confidence. The school security guard, previously indifferent, nodded respectfully as she passed. In PE, Coach Miller seemed agitated, constantly checking his phone. For once, he barely noticed Talia. At lunch, Zoe slid into the seat beside her. Something weird is happening, she whispered. Coach Miller got called to the office twice this morning. He came back looking seriously upset. Jason joined them, his voice low. My mom works in administration. She said someone's been requesting records about Coach Miller. Official requests that can't be ignored. Talia hid her smile behind her sandwich. Her father's plan was already in motion. After school, Principal Wagner intercepted Talia in the hallway. Miss Freeman, he said, his smile strained. I understand your father has been making inquiries about our staff. Has he? Talia replied innocently. Wagner's smile hardened. Whatever you and your father think you're doing, I suggest you reconsider. Madison Heights has a reputation to maintain. So do I. Talia responded, surprised by her own boldness. And so does my father. Wagner's eyes narrowed. And what exactly does your father do? He protects people, Talia said simply. The principal's phone rang before he could respond. As he answered it, his face paled visibly. Yes, sir. No, sir, I wasn't aware the Department of Education was. Of course, we'll cooperate fully with. Talia walked away, hiding her smile. That evening, Ray was waiting at the house when Talia arrived home. He sat at the kitchen table, cleaning a handgun with practiced ease. Talia froze in the doorway. Ray looked up, catching her expression. "Don't worry," he said calmly, reassembling the weapon with lightning speed and securing it in a holster. "Just an old habit. Helps me think." "Is that part of the plan?" Talia asked hesitantly. Ray laughed. No. Your father would never allow that. We're soldiers, not criminals." His face grew serious. "Though I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about putting the fear of God into that coach of yours." "How did you all meet?" Talia asked, sitting across from him. "My dad never talks about his work." Ray considered her for a moment. "Your father commanded the most elite covert operations unit in the military. The missions we ran, let's just say we solved problems when diplomacy failed. Was he good at it?" Ray's expression softened. "The best. He led from the front. Never asked us to take risks he wouldn't take himself. Men like your father are rare, Talia. When he gives an order, people still jump, even years later. Like you all did when he called." "Exactly." Ray smiled. "Though this mission might be the most important one we've ever had." Marcus entered, phone in hand. "The Department of Education is sending a representative to the fundraiser." Michael's contact came through. "Michael knows someone at the Department of Education?" Talia asked. "Michael's wife," Marcus explained. "Deputy Director of Civil Rights Enforcement." Talia blinked in surprise. "Is there anyone you guys don't know?" "That's the point of a network," Marcus said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You build it before you need it." The next morning, Coach Miller was watching for Talia when she arrived at PE. His usual confidence had been replaced with nervous energy. "Freeman," he called as students filled into the gym. "A word." Talia approached cautiously, remembering the bruise on her arm. "Look," he said, his voice unnaturally quiet. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I push all my students hard. It's how I coach. You sprayed cleaning chemicals on me," Talia replied evenly. He winced. "A bad joke. It won't happen again." "Because you're sorry, or because you're scared?" Talia asked. His face hardened. "I don't know what your father thinks he's doing, but he's making a mistake. I have friends in this town, too." The threat hung in the air between them. After class, Talia found Jason waiting by her locker. "Coach Miller just got served with papers," he whispered excitedly. "Right in the middle of the teacher's lounge. Some kind of official investigation." Within hours, the school was buzzing with rumors. Teachers whispered in hallways. Administrators hurried between meetings. Something big was happening. When Talia arrived home, her father and his team were gathered around a laptop. "Wagner's panicking," James reported. "He's been on the phone all afternoon trying to call in favors. But too many people are watching now." "What exactly did you do?" Talia asked. "Created visibility," Marcus explained. "The Department of Education is formally investigating discrimination complaints. The local newspaper is running a story. The school board has called an emergency meeting." "All without mentioning your name," Ray added. "Your father was very specific about protecting you from backlash." Pride swelled in Talia's chest. Her father had mobilized an entire operation, not with guns or threats, but with information and strategy. "Will it be enough?" she asked. Marcus's expression turned serious. "That depends on what happens at the fundraiser tomorrow night. Are you ready for your part?" Talia took a deep breath. "I'm ready." The plan was set. The team was in position. Tomorrow, everything would change. What none of them knew was that Coach Miller had made plans of his own. The Madison Heights Gymnasium had been transformed for the annual fundraiser. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling. Tables covered in white cloths dotted the floor. A small stage stood at one end where Principal Wagner would later present his vision for the school's future. Talia smoothed down her dress, a simple blue one her mother had loved. Marcus stood beside her in a crisp suit, looking nothing like the retired soldier who did yard work on weekends. Tonight, he carried himself with unmistakable authority. "Remember," he said quietly as they approached the entrance, "stay calm no matter what happens. We have everything in place." Inside, the fundraiser was in full swing. Parents chatted in clusters. Teachers moved between groups, smiling and networking. School board members wore name tags and important expressions. Principal Wagner spotted them immediately. His smile faltered as he made his way over. "Mr. Freeman," he said, extending his hand. "I don't believe we formally met." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "No, we haven't. Though I've heard a great deal about you." Wagner's smile tightened. "All good things, I hope." "That would depend on your definition of good," Marcus replied evenly. Before Wagner could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Michael entered with a striking black woman in a tailored suit. She carried herself with unmistakable authority. "Who is that?" Talia whispered. "Michael's wife," Marcus replied. "Lisa Thompson, Deputy Director for the Department of Education Civil Rights Division." Principal Wagner's face drained of color. He excused himself quickly and intercepted the newcomers, his body language screaming panic. Across the room, Talia spotted Coach Miller leaning against the wall, a drink clutched in his hand. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. Ms. Diaz appeared at Talia's side. "Everything's ready," she whispered. "I have the documentation you asked for." The evening progressed with speeches and forced laughter. The tension in the room grew as rumors spread about who Lisa Thompson was and why she was there. Finally, Principal Wagner took the stage. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual fundraiser," he began, his voice overly cheerful. "Madison Heights has always prided itself on excellence, inclusion, and—" "Excuse me," Marcus interrupted, standing. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Before you continue, I'd like to address something important." Principal Wagner's smile froze. "Mr. Freeman, this isn't the appropriate time for—" "I disagree," Marcus replied, walking toward the stage. "When it comes to the safety and dignity of our children, any time is appropriate." A hush fell over the crowd. "For those who don't know me," Marcus continued, his voice commanding the room, "I'm Marcus Freeman. My daughter Talia is a junior here." He climbed the steps to the stage. Principal Wagner took an involuntary step back. "Before I retired," Marcus said, his voice carrying without effort, "I was Commander Marcus Freeman, United States Special Operations Command. I led men into the most dangerous situations imaginable, and I never left anyone behind." The room was absolutely silent now. "2 weeks ago," Marcus continued, "my daughter was physically assaulted by a teacher at this school. When she reported it, she was threatened with academic consequences." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "That's a serious allegation," Principal Wagner cut in, trying to regain control. "And completely unfounded, is it?" Marcus asked. He nodded to Michael, who activated a projector. On the wall appeared the video of Coach Miller spraying Talia with cleaning solution, his words clearly audible. "I will fix that little odor issue." Gasps filled the room. Parents turned to stare at Coach Miller, who had straightened from the wall, his face flushed with anger. "This is one incident," Marcus continued as the video looped. "But there are others." James stepped forward, distributing folders to school board members. These contained documented complaints against Coach Miller spanning 5 years and 3 school districts. All involved discriminatory treatment of students of color. All were buried. Principal Wagner sputtered. "These records are confidential." "How did you—" "That's your concern?" A woman shouted from the crowd. "Not that a teacher assaulted a student." The room erupted in angry voices. Parents stood, demanding answers. School board members flipped through the folders with growing alarm. Lisa Thompson stepped forward. "As a representative of the Department of Education Civil Rights Division, I find these allegations extremely troubling. Our office will be conducting a full investigation." Coach Miller suddenly pushed through the crowd toward the stage, his face contorted with rage. "This is bullshit," he shouted. "You think you can come in here with your military background and threaten me? You don't know who you're dealing with." He lunged up the stairs toward Marcus. The room gasped collectively. What happened next occurred so quickly many would later disagree about the details. Coach Miller swung wildly. Marcus sidestepped with fluid grace. One precise movement later, Coach Miller found himself face down on the stage, his arm locked behind him, completely immobilized by Marcus's efficient hold. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Marcus said quietly, though his microphone carried the words to everyone. "A bully who's never faced consequences." Security guards rushed forward, but Marcus had already released Coach Miller and stepped back, straightening his suit jacket. "This man assaulted me," Coach Miller shouted, scrambling to his feet. "You all saw it." "Actually," Ray called from where he'd been recording everything on his phone, "we all saw you attack him and Commander Freeman defend himself without causing injury." Principal Wagner tried desperately to regain control. "Please, everyone. This is a misunderstanding that's gotten out of hand. Coach Miller is a valued member of our—" "My son came home with a black eye last semester," a parent interrupted. "Said he fell during PE. Was that a misunderstanding, too?" "Jamal was kept from the basketball team despite outplaying everyone at tryouts," another parent added. "Coach said he had attitude problems." The floodgates opened. Story after story emerged, years of incidents suddenly given voice. Talia stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone from the stunned principal. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is about every student who was treated differently because of their skin color, their accent, or where they come from. This is about a system that protects the wrong people." A school board member stood. "As board chairperson, I'm calling for an emergency session." "Principal Wagner, Coach Miller, you're both suspended pending investigation." "You can't do that," Wagner protested. "Watch me," the chairperson replied grimly. As security escorted Coach Miller and Principal Wagner from the gymnasium, the crowd broke into applause. Parents surrounded Talia and Marcus, some offering support, others sharing their own stories. Lisa Thompson approached them. "Commander Freeman," she said, "your daughter showed remarkable courage tonight." "She gets that from her mother," Marcus replied, putting his arm around Talia's shoulders. "The department will ensure this investigation is thorough," Lisa promised. No stone unturned. As the crowd began to disperse, Talia found herself surrounded by classmates. Zoe hugged her tightly. Jason offered a fist bump. Even students she barely knew approached to express support. "You did it," Zoe whispered. "You actually did it." Looking across the room at her father, standing tall among his team, Talia smiled. "We did it," she corrected. "Together." 3 weeks after the fundraiser showdown, Madison Heights High School felt like a different place. The hallways buzzed with a new energy. Teachers who had once looked the other way now intervened when they witnessed unfair treatment. Students who had stayed silent began to speak up. Change had come like a thunderclap. Talia stood by her locker, sorting through textbooks when Ms. Diaz approached. "Have you heard the news?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "What news?" "The school board's decision just came down. Coach Miller has been permanently removed. Principal Wagner has been demoted pending further investigation." Relief washed over Talia. "So it's really over." "That part is," Ms. Diaz confirmed. "But the changes are just beginning." She wasn't exaggerating. The Department of Education investigation had revealed systemic problems far beyond one coach and principal. New anti-discrimination policies were being implemented district-wide. Teacher training was scheduled for the summer. An anonymous reporting system had been established for students who experienced or witnessed discrimination, all because one girl and her father had refused to be silenced. After school, Talia found Jason waiting by her car. "I wanted to thank you," he said, uncharacteristically serious. "What you and your dad did, it changed things for a lot of us." "I just stood up for myself," Talia said. "Yeah, but you showed the rest of us how." Jason smiled. "By the way, Coach Rivera wants to talk to you. He's the interim athletic director now." Anthony Rivera, the former assistant coach who had always seemed uncomfortable with Coach Miller's behavior, had been promoted in the shakeup. Unlike his predecessor, he had a reputation for fairness. Talia found him in the gym, setting up for basketball practice. "Freeman," he called when he saw her. "Just the person I wanted to see." She approached cautiously, old habits dying hard. "Track team tryouts are next week," he said. "With your times, you'd be a real asset." "You've seen my times?" Talia asked, surprised. I've been watching, Rivera admitted. Miller might have been blind to talent that didn't look like him, but I'm not. What do you say? For the first time in months, Talia felt excitement about school athletics. I'll be there. At home, the Freeman house had returned to normal, or a new version of normal. Marcus's team had dispersed back to their lives, though they called regularly. The dining room no longer resembled a military command center. The only reminder of recent events was a framed news article hanging in the hallway. Local father exposes discrimination at Madison Heights High. Marcus was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Talia arrived home, the familiar rhythm of his knife against the cutting board a comforting sound. "How was school?" he asked. "Good," Talia replied and meant it. "Coach Miller's gone for good. And I'm trying out for the track team next week." Marcus smiled. "I always knew you'd find your stride." "Dad," Talia said, sitting at the counter, "I've been thinking about everything that happened." "About what you did." "What we did," he corrected. "You could have handled it differently," she observed. "Your team. I saw how they looked at you. You could have scared Coach Miller away, or worse." Marcus set down his knife. "There was a time when I might have chosen a different approach. But that's not the example I want to set for you. Using the system instead of going around it, using the right tools for the right job," he clarified. "Violence is sometimes necessary in war. But this wasn't war. This was about justice and change." Talia considered this. "Your team seemed disappointed. They didn't get to do anything more dramatic." Marcus laughed. "Old habits die hard. But they understand better than most that true victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something better in the aftermath." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Talia opened the door to find Zoe and Jason standing on the porch with a group of students she recognized from school. "Surprise," Zoe announced. "We formed a student advocacy group. We want to build on what you started. And we need a leader," Jason added. "Someone who's not afraid to speak truth to power." Talia looked back at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Come in," she said, opening the door wider. "We've got work to do." As the students filed into the living room, Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway. Pride swelled in his chest at the young woman his daughter had become, not because she had his tactical mind or her mother's determination, though she had both, but because when faced with injustice, she had found the courage to stand and fight. Not with fists or weapons, but with truth, with dignity, with persistence. In 20 years of military service, Marcus had led men into battle against enemies of every description. He had planned operations that changed the course of conflicts. He had been decorated for valor under fire. But watching his daughter lead this new mission, this fight for justice in the halls where young minds were shaped, he knew it might be the most important operation he'd ever supported. The next day, a new flyer appeared on bulletin boards throughout Madison Heights High School. Student Advocacy Alliance, because every voice matters. First meeting, Thursday after school. By lunchtime, the sign-up sheet was full. In the gym, Coach Rivera watched Talia lead warm-up stretches with a preseason track team. Her confident voice carried across the space once dominated by Coach Miller's shouts. "Remember," she called out, "we rise together or not at all." Outside the school, Marcus Freeman sat in his car, watching his daughter through the gym's windows. She moved with purpose, her head high, her back straight. Not because she feared punishment, but because she knew her worth. He started the engine, satisfied. The mission was complete. But her work now, was just beginning. And Commander Marcus Freeman couldn't have been prouder. The starting pistol cracked through the air. 8 runners exploded from the blocks, a blur of color and motion against the red track. In lane 4, Talia Freeman pushed forward, her body a perfect instrument of speed and precision. The state championship 400-meter final. The culmination of a year's work. In the stands, Marcus Freeman stood with Ray and Michael, who had flown in specially for the event. They watched as Talia maintained perfect form around the first curve, exactly as they had practiced during those early morning training sessions. "She's got this," Ray said confidently. Marcus said nothing, his eyes fixed on his daughter. At the halfway mark, Talia was shoulder to shoulder with the defending champion from Westlake Prep. The crowd's roar grew louder as the runners entered the final stretch. Talia dug deeper, finding that reserve of strength she discovered over the past year. Not just physical strength, but something more profound. The knowledge that she could face anything and overcome it. She crossed the finish line first by 0.2 of a second. A new state record. The Madison Heights section of the stands erupted. Students waved banners emblazoned with the school's new motto, Excellence Through Equity, the direct result of reforms Talia and the Student Advocacy Alliance had fought for. As Talia stood in the podium receiving her gold medal, she spotted her father in the crowd. He gave her a small nod that meant more than any shouted praise. The nod that said, "Mission accomplished." Later, at the celebration dinner, Talia was surrounded by teammates, friends, and family. The restaurant buzzed with excited chatter and laughter. A far cry from the tense, quiet meals of a year ago when she had dreaded each school day. Speech, someone called out, and soon the whole room joined in. Talia stood, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm not good at speeches," she began. "Yes, you are," interrupted Jason. "We've all seen you in action." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Okay, fine," Talia conceded with a smile. "I just want to say thank you. To my teammates who push me every day. To Ms. Diaz and Coach Rivera who believed in me before I believed in myself." She paused, looking at her father. "And to my dad who taught me the most important lesson of all, that standing up for yourself isn't just about fighting back. It's about changing the battlefield entirely." Marcus raised his glass in acknowledgement, his eyes suspiciously bright. After dinner, as they walked to the car, Talia and her father fell into step together. "I got a call from Lisa Thompson yesterday," Marcus said casually. "The Department of Education is expanding their investigation to 3 other districts based on what they found at Madison Heights. Does that mean more schools will change?" Talia asked. "It means your impact is still growing," Marcus replied. "What started with one brave stand has become something much bigger." They reached the car and Talia paused, looking back at the restaurant where her friends were still celebrating. "You know what's funny?" she said. "If Coach Miller hadn't been such a racist jerk, none of this would have happened. The Student Advocacy Alliance, the policy changes, the new principal. That's often how change works," Marcus observed. "Something breaks badly enough that people finally pay attention. I used to think being strong meant handling everything myself," Talia admitted, "not telling you what was happening. And now I know that real strength is knowing when to stand alone and when to build an army." Marcus smiled. "That, Talia Freeman, is what leadership looks like." He unlocked the car. "Speaking of which, I hear Harvard's interested in a certain state champion with an impressive record of community activism." Talia grinned. "Their track coach called last week. And I told them I'm considering all my options. Yale has a better social justice program." Marcus laughed. "That's my girl. Always looking at the whole battlefield." The next morning, Talia stood in front of Madison Heights High School, looking at the building with new eyes. The same brick walls, the same wide steps, but everything else had changed. Inside, freshmen moved confidently through hallways now monitored by student allies trained to intervene when they witnessed bullying or discrimination. The Student Advocacy Alliance had grown from a dozen members to over 100, with chapters forming at neighboring schools. Principal Diana Chin, hired after Wagner's eventual resignation, had implemented every recommendation from the student-faculty committee Talia co-chaired. In the trophy case near the main office, Talia's state championship medal held a place of honor. But it was the smaller plaque beside it that made her proudest. Madison Heights Student Advocacy Alliance, Excellence Through Action. Ms. Diaz appeared beside her. "Admiring your handiwork. Just thinking about how much has changed," Talia replied. "Because of you," Ms. Diaz said. "You know, I almost transferred before all this happened. I couldn't stomach watching what Coach Miller did, but felt powerless to stop it." "You tried," Talia reminded her. "You reported him. Reports that disappeared into Wagner's filing cabinet," Ms. Diaz said bitterly, "until you and your father came along." The final bell rang, and students hurried to class. As Talia turned to go, Ms. Diaz touched her arm. By the way, we're using your story in the new teacher orientation. How to recognize discrimination and what happens when we fail to act. Talia paused. Do you tell them about the spray bottle? Every detail, Ms. Diaz confirmed. It's uncomfortable, but necessary. Some lessons need to be felt to be learned. That afternoon, Talia led the Student Advocacy Alliance meeting in the newly dedicated Equity Center, formerly Principal Wagner's oversized office. 40 students from all grades filled the space. Okay, everyone, Talia began. Today we're finalizing our proposal for the district-wide peer mediation program. Jason, can you update us on the budget? As the meeting progressed, Talia found herself watching the faces around her. A year ago, many of these students had been bystanders, watching in uncomfortable silence as she was humiliated. Now they were allies, advocates, agents of change. After the meeting, Talia checked her phone to find a text from her father. Remember dinner at 7. Ray and team sending graduation gift. Apparently involves secure communications equipment. Told them you're going to college, not an intelligence agency. They don't see the difference. Talia laughed out loud. Her father's team had become like eccentric uncles, constantly sending practical gifts that no ordinary teenager would need or understand how to use. As she walked home under the warm spring sun, Talia reflected on the journey of the past year. From victim to advocate. From silence to voice. From fear to purpose. Coach Miller had intended to humiliate her, to put her in her place. Instead, he had inadvertently set her on a path to finding her true power. And in doing so, he had changed not just her life, but an entire community. That evening, as Talia and Marcus sat on their porch watching the sunset, a comfortable silence between them, Talia finally asked the question that had lingered in her mind. Dad, do you ever miss it? Your old life, the missions, the purpose. Marcus considered the question carefully. I miss the brotherhood, he admitted. The absolute trust we had in each other. But the purpose. He shook his head. I've found something better. What's that? He looked at his daughter, this extraordinary young woman who had transformed from a reluctant warrior into a natural leader. Watching you change the world, he said simply. One battlefield at a time. Talia smiled and leaned against her father's shoulder, both of them gazing forward, toward whatever mission came next. And for the first time in her life, Talia Freeman wasn't afraid of any challenge that might come her way. After all, she was her father's daughter. And some fights were worth having. That brings the story to a close. Talia never shouted or fought back with fists, but she didn't stay silent either. Her strength lived in the way she kept showing up, even when it hurt. And when her father saw the truth, he didn't explode. He moved with quiet power and purpose. Together, they turned humiliation into justice. The world doesn't always change because someone gets louder. Sometimes it changes because one person dares to stand firm, then another stands beside them. What began with a spray bottle ended with a shift in an entire school. And that's the kind of strength that never goes unnoticed. What do you think? Did Coach Miller get what he deserved? Drop your thoughts below. If you're still here, it means you love stories with real impact, so be sure to subscribe. You won't find another channel telling them like this. Click over and watch the next one.